Hey there, everyone. With the ending of ModGear recently, I thought it'd be a good idea to, well, talk. That's pretty much a good way of putting it. I want to talk about ModGear, pretty much just the series, the show as a whole, its history, how this show was originally made in the first place, the choices made between different episodes, and a little bit more. So I guess let's just sit down, grab a can of Kool-Aid or something. Let's talk about ModGear Season 1. Let's talk about ModGear's first incarnation, I guess you can call it, Phase 1 of ModGear, which we're going to call ModGear Alpha. There you go. Alpha sounds like a good word. So this is pretty much the very first time ModGear, I guess, was necessarily a thing. And to do that, I want to go back to Gary's mod, probably like a year and a half ago. If you remember a year and a half ago, here and there, I would do Gary's mod videos related to certain vehicles, maybe from like the Steam Workshop or add-ons made by certain people. I would take these vehicles, I would review them in some really weird meme-like fashion. It's just something I do normally. Fortunately, that series ended up dying later down the line, with more space-related content being more evident on the channel. But that pretty much, if you think about it, is ModGear's first incarnation, because if you really look at the way it was designed compared to the way ModGear's designed, you'll notice that show still has a lot of characteristics that are very similar to ModGear. Like, how is the way the testing is designed in ModGear? Look at the old review series. It's very similar. I want to talk, since ModGear as a whole, I want to talk about how ModGear's name originally came up to be. ModGear's name, I guess, originates from the idea of, as you probably might be able to know, it originates from TopGear. I'm a very big fan of TopGear as well as the Grand Tour, at least, you know, before the trio was fired from the BBC, but we'll gloss over that. So I originally named the name off of it, so you have the gear part. Where does mod come into play? Mod came into play because, well, Gary's mod. I wanted to have something related to people know, saying, okay, it's related to TopGear, but it's also related to Gary's mod. Because, you know, you want to have that. So I guess, with that out of the way, let's talk about ModGear's secondary incarnation, or Phase 2, better known many, or I'm going to call it at least, as ModGear Beta. So, most of you are going to think that ModGear originally began in April or May of this year. I can't exactly remember when it started, but it's somewhere around there. That's actually false. In fact, ModGear's first true development as a legit series actually started in February of this year. Originally, before the idea of me even thinking of returning to YouTube as a whole, ModGear was originally planned to be a series where I could just show it off to the family and stuff like that. Other people, friends, loved ones, stuff like that. It was never meant to be a YouTube series. Therefore, ModGear in its early stages was never meant to be commentated. It was never meant to be a commentary-like series like it is now. It was meant to be having more captions. It was meant to be more cinematic-like, which is why the episodes are a lot longer than they used to be, and they're shorter now. Originally, because ModGear was still following its season-like format back then, ModGear was not actually supposed to have 12 episodes like it did in this season. It was actually only supposed to have 10. About only 5 of those episodes were filmed, and they were filmed during the course of February and into early March, because right around the end of March was when I realized, okay, maybe it's a good time to return to YouTube, and then that's when I came back in mid-April. And so you're probably wondering, what happened to those 5 episodes? Well, because they never got uploaded, and because they never became the overall series for ModGear, they ended up getting into a separate folder on like a separate hard drive, I guess you could call it, and it was labeled as the Lost Season, a season that never saw the light of day. So I guess the only proper way to just show you a little bit as to what this show was originally supposed to be, I'm going to show you just a small little segment of the opening for the first episode of what was supposed to be ModGear's first season. Now, if this were to have been true, ModGear probably wouldn't have premiered in April or May. It would have probably premiered sometime in March, because the series was just going really well at the time. So, here is a little bit of footage from what's now known as ModGear's Lost Season. So yeah, you may be able to notice that ModGear was definitely planned to be a lot different compared to what it ended up turning out to be. So I guess with the beta out of the way, let's talk about Season 1 development, what ModGear ended up becoming. So, what was ModGear changed? Well, the main core philosophy of the show didn't really change that much. The idea of testing certain cars and lap stuff stayed pretty much the same. The only difference was the show kind of lost its cinematic, more like feeling in the lost season, and it was more commentary based, meaning all the episodes were commentated and everything felt more natural, like a legit TV show. So in that case, I want to talk a little bit about episode layout. I want to talk about how each episode was made, so that way everyone's here on the same page so we can understand a little bit more as to how ModGear was originally developed. So let's talk about Season 1 by starting with, well, Episode 1, which is, of course, starring the Nissan GTR. At the time when developing ModGear, I had been driving the GTR just kind of randomly throughout different maps and testing it just because it was a car that I would drive constantly, whether it be playing with friends or family members. And I always wanted to make a video regarding the car. So when I figured developing ModGear, I figured, okay, the first episode's probably going to be related to the cover car of that season. So let's make the GTR the cover car. And that's how the first episode originally came into thought, or made. Let's talk about Episode 2, which starred the Regera. The Koenigsegg Regera it's not really always been a car I've personally enjoyed, because there's just so many weird things about it in Gary's mod compared to the real thing. It's way more slippery in Gary's mod than I thought, and its speed is just unflipping imaginable. But I didn't want to have a car that wasn't going to be extremely flipping fast while also spinning out constantly, if that makes any sense, which probably doesn't. But I ended up putting it in the season because I figured that I wanted to have multiple supercars in a season, because, you know, season layout. Next thing is I want to talk about Episode 3, better known many as Police to Meet You. This particular episode starred the Crown Victoria, and I'm going to immediately bust out by saying Episode 3 was never meant to actually have the Crown Victoria as its star. In fact, the original idea was to make the Damaso Pantera the original car for that episode. It's a car that's actually been reviewed in ModGear The Lost Season, which here's a little clip of it right now. And I instead decided to hold it off for a little bit because the Pantera, there was so much I wanted to do with it, and I wanted to wait for a little bit to figure out what I wanted to do with it, make it into a proper episode, and work out from there. So instead, I was just browsing through stuff, thinking what cool stuff I can do, and when I saw the Crown Victoria in the workshop, I'm like, alright, let's work with this, let's see if we can do something cool with this. And that's how Episode 3 was born. Moving on to Episode 4, Miata Go Screw Yourself. This episode was fun, because at the time, I would always see little Miatas driving on the road constantly where I live, because Miatas are the more common tuner cars in the area I live in. So I always see a lot of them here and there pretty often, mostly on the weekends here and there. And there were so many to a point where it was making me upset, because there was just so many. Because you would never see any other tuning cars, you wouldn't see 370Zs, you wouldn't see older like Mustangs or anything, you wouldn't see them anymore. You would just see Miatas everywhere. And I figured I wanted to make an episode to explain that a little bit, and I wanted to bring in the idea of, okay, this is what I hate about this car, let's bring it in and just make it funny as heck. And that's what happened. The idea with old versus new in that episode also played a major factor, because I wanted to just kind of show how the old one was better than the new one, because let's admit, both cars are good, but there's so many of them now on the road that it just makes it feel like there's way too many of them, and it's unnecessary to have that many of them. And that episode was made just to show my passion for the idea of, okay, I don't like this, let's change this. So that's pretty much that with Episode 4, it was just a crazy episode, I'll admit it. Moving on to Episode 5, which was the AMG GTR episode. The AMG GTR it's always been a car I've endured and looked down on, because it's a very is very powerful, it's very mean, it's aggressive, and I love the car just because of those characteristics. And I wanted to review the car for quite a long time whilst during the early developments of ModGear in its early stages in the season. So I figured, okay, let's bring it on, let's see what it has. I never expected this car to have so much grip, with it breaking the Trackmania All-Star War, as you guys have seen from season recap, setting the fastest lap around Futaro. It was just amazing. Like, I never expected this car to do this well in Gmod, and honestly, it was shocked me, and it scared me a little bit too. And episode 5 was just great because of that. Episode 6, which was the Citroen DS3 Rally. I wanted to incorporate a rally-like feeling into the season, and I want to have at least one rally car in there somewhere. And because when it comes to anything like rally-based, like rally Porsches and stuff that I drive around with in Gary's mod, I usually go for this car. It has good speed, it has good traction. It's all around perfect for anything you're doing, as it said in the bump tests and gravel road segments and everything during the season. It was a good rally car. And I wanted to incorporate that somehow, and it was great. I enjoyed it. I even gave it a little Mario Kart themed little test, which was really nice, and I really enjoyed that. And that pretty much just wraps that with episode 6. Episode 7 was more focused. Episode 7 was more focused on the idea of old American muscle, with the idea of the Pontiac Trans Am being the star of that episode. I had always wanted to do American muscle when it came to ModGear as a whole, and I figured, okay, what's the best way to do this? I could just go with like a Firebird or something. I could have gone with a Dodge Charger. There's so much I could have done, but I didn't want to go like full Dukes of Hazzard, because I just could have been playing like the great American songs, you know? But instead, I decided to go with something a little bit different. I instead decided to go with the Pontiac Trans Am, because Trans Am as a whole is a very well-known American muscle car. It's commonly known to many as one of the all-time classics. And I figured it's like, if you think about it, it's kind of the rips off through the Dukes of Hazzard. I know that's going to piss off a lot of people, but it kind of is if you think about it. And I wanted to include that into the season, because why not? It was awesome. Moving on to episode 8, we have down the 177. The Aston Martin 177, it's always been a car that I've always wanted to drive, whether that be just in racing games or real life as a whole. Its hefty price tag, I'll admit it, over $1 million. It's a lot for a car. What shocked me was just how slippery this car was while testing it in Gmod. It was just a lot more slippery than I thought. But this car actually made some really good sound, and it felt a lot more like a James Bond car. It felt like a car you could see James Bond driving in the new James Bond-like movie, which is why, of course, we outed him in the season recap credits as James Bond in cosplay. I truly love that episode. It's one of my personal favorites, and that's pretty much the history on episode 8. Moving on to episode 9, Fox of the Body. The Ford Fox Body, it's always been a car that I personally enjoyed, because, again, it's like the Trans Am. It's down the roots of American muscle. It's always been a car that's tuners have always been having a lot of fun. It's like it's up there with the Mustangs, really. It's really all I gotta say. It's up there with the Mustangs in terms of tuner styling. But this car was super simple. It was not fast. It was grippy. It did everything really well. So that's why I put it in the season. Moving on to episode 10, which is of course one of the all-time favorites this season, is the Volkswagen Scirocco. As a whole, the Scirocco was actually added into the season not because I just stumbled upon it or it was a car I knew about, but it's actually because of something I learned a long time ago. A little bit of a history lesson here. Back in the day, and by back in the day I mean a number of years ago, I used to play Forza Horizon, and one of the cars I would drive constantly was, funny enough, the Volkswagen Scirocco. It worked great as a rally car, and it worked really well as a street car, and it did everything really well. So I figured, okay, let's bring this car into the game as one of my all-time favorite cars from the Forza series. Unfortunately, Volkswagen isn't in the game really that much anymore, but hey, it's so nice to see their cars are returning in my own series. That's why I put the Volkswagen Scirocco in the series in the first place, because history. And finally, the last car I want to mention is for episode 11, and of course being the love of my Prius, the Toyota Prius. This car I wanted to end the season with because it's just a giant meme. I'm very well known for my memes, I'm very well known for it, So I figured, okay, let's end the season off right with the idea of just making something that's a giant meme, am I right? Okay, maybe I'm not right. But besides that, point is, I enjoyed this season, that's why I put it at the end of it. And that pretty much wraps up Season 1 development. There's a lot going on with this show, and the episode names and the way the cards are designed, and how the cards are picked, and the way everything's designed is very unique to this series, but hopefully everyone is up on the same page now as to how ModGear was developed in the first place. And that's pretty much going to be a wrap on this episode. Again, this was pretty much just a simple way of explaining where ModGear pretty much comes from, and how it's gotten to where it is today, starting from humble beginnings about a year and a half ago. If you want to watch ModGear for yourself again, the first season is up on its own playlist here on the channel for your viewing pleasure. You can watch all 12 episodes located in the playlist tab, or I'll leave a link in the description, hopefully I will, to the first episode of the series so you guys can watch it. It's a really good series, so I highly suggest you go watch it. Anyway, with that, that's going to wrap up this video, so if you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like on the video, and make sure you guys comment down below if you guys enjoyed this little, I guess, developer Q&A, if you really think about it, because this is pretty much the entire development of Season 1 as a whole. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a mandatory, like, series. This is going to be stuff I do for maybe, like, the start of an upcoming series or the end of a series, just to kind of explain exactly why this series was chosen in the first place and stuff like that. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I am Panda Power Sauce, and I will hopefully see you soon. Later!